Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to this webinar on proactive hunting of cyber threats. This is brought to you by Arctic Wolf. My name is Sridhar Karnam, and today we have a special guest speaker, Ross Phillips, who's security engineer. So let's start with some housekeeping work. This is a live presentation. We'd be very happy to take questions as it comes. So make sure to ask any questions on the questions tab, so we can go ahead and answer the questions while we are doing the webinar. We don't mind getting interrupted, and also make sure to give us feedback at the end of the webinar, so we know that this is making sense to you or not, and so on and so forth. So with that, let me get started. And also this webinar will be recorded and will be available at the same link that you see. So if you want to watch it again or send it to your network of friends, you are more than welcome to do so. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Sridhar Karnam. I am the head of product marketing for Arctic Wolf. I've been in the IT security for about 5 years. Very specifically, I was in product management for Oxide SIM, and prior to that, I've been with Hewlett-Packard for about 10 years, focusing on IT operations and enterprise market. So I've been dealing with enterprise IT and also medium-sized IT for a number of years. With that, I just want Ross also to introduce himself. Ross?
Yeah, I'm Ross Phillips. I'm a security engineer here at Arctic Wolf Networks. I graduated with a bachelor's in information security, which was actually at the time being offered, was the only security degree in the country that was offered as a bachelor's degree, and I started off at Google and YouTube and worked there for 3 years before finally looking for something new, and I found Arctic Wolf, and I've been here for just a little bit over 2 years now.
That's great. It's good to have you today. We love to hear from a security engineering perspective, and Ross is one of our lead security engineers. And he manages at least about 25 to 30 customers at the most. Yes. Yeah. Great. All right. So let's get to the topic for today. And I think before we go and sort of interview him and ask him a couple of questions on his day-to-day and things, we'd love to get some perspective on the context of what we are trying to talk about. We recently did a survey for the mid-market companies, and we found that about 2/3 of the companies are worried about these top 3 things. It doesn't necessarily mean that these are the 3 things that's affecting the cybersecurity, but this is the mid-market perspective of what they think is causing a lot of harm to them: malware, phishing, and data theft. I think it is relevant to today's discussion topic as well, because we will be looking into some of these conversations. I'm having slight internet issues. Just give me 1 second. Right. So I think the reason why we are all here is because security is costly, it's complex, and it's resource intensive. I think there are hundreds of reasons why we are here. It's primarily because of the bad IT hygiene that we've had so far, very high, and that bad hygiene has made the IT extremely complex, and because of the complex nature of IT, solving the security problems has become very costly. And adding on top of that, we have advanced attacks coming in from sophisticated hackers with tools that are really, really advanced. Plus, we're adding new surface area of attacks, like IoTs about 2 years ago, and blockchain a year ago, and it just keeps growing. And So we need to make sure that we are prepared for tomorrow's attacks as well. So one of the first things that we noticed is that in the managed security services space, which is where a lot of people are investing their time and money in, about more than half of the exploits took over 3 months to be detected, and that clearly shows that there is something missing in those managed security services. And 1 in 6 companies said that they have proactive hunting capabilities. So next time you're looking at a managed security service or an outsourced security, you need to make sure that some of these capabilities make sense. I think so. Typically, about 30% of the time, the companies offer either the assessment or the integrations and orchestration with other security devices, detection and incident response capabilities, or pure security analytics. So it's very difficult for you to get all of this in a way, and proactive hunting in a single vendor. So I think we just want to make sure that you understand what proactive hunting is and why is it important, and how you look for it. So first and foremost, from our perspective, I believe that detection and response should be the 2 key metrics that you design your entire security solutions in. I mean, we just went over hundreds of statistics. You can't really get a good security by having such vast amount of statistics. I think if you focus on solving 2 problems, detection and response, and focusing on the key metrics, which is the mean time to detect and mean time to respond, and architect, build, and design your security solutions around it, you're much more efficient, because I think apart from compliance and risk management and all the good stuff, the cybersecurity is primarily about detecting and responding to threats in real time, or at least as soon as you can. So hunting. So let's see what typically security operations centers do from a hunting perspective, right? So we've time and again seen and spoken to customers, and of all the things that SOC does, one of the key things, the way it is measured from a success standpoint, viewpoint, is that SOC reduces the time to detect and respond, time to detect and time to respond to incidents significantly. So typically what happens in SOC, as you can see on the screen, is there are a bunch of data coming in, this flow data, your users' applications and network data, your endpoints, your IoTs, are all collected, aggregated, correlated, they go through some sort of a log management, and then they're sent through a bunch of correlation engines, machine learning, and so on and so forth. So that creates a bunch of alerts, and then those alerts then become security incidents, and you have a SOC analyst who perform typically some forensic investigation and analytics using some of the analytics tools. But not every time you actually get the complete security events with which you can do full forensics or conduct. So you have a bunch of false positives, you don't get all the security events, you don't get the top 10 list, you don't get the priorities, you don't get it by severity and criticality. So there's a lot of ways and reasons why having just a SOC analyst go through your standard typical SIM type of operation is not enough. So what majority of the matured SOCs do, including us to our customers, is that we take all these correlation data, create a bunch of data lake, inject it with real-time threat intelligence, and then with some of the other tools that we are going to discuss, that creates a lot of indicators of compromises. And those IOCs are analyzed by SOC engineers to detect. And that is, from our perspective, at least from my perspective, what proactive hunting is. So, this is all good. Let's talk to the person who actually does this for 9 to 5 living to see what it means. Ross, let's start with our first question. What is threat hunting?
So threat hunting is essentially the process or action of purposely setting out to identify, validate, mitigate incidents of compromise or areas of compromise, potential indicators of compromise that are already in your environment. We're all aware that you're being scanned every single day from the internet, that you're being hit by attempted exploits, there's exploit kits, there's all this going on on the outside of your network. But really, you want to start by focusing what's inside your network, whether that's employees, whether that's hardware, whether that's software, whether that's internal business processes or workflows that exist in the company already. Actually going out, and it's an ongoing process too. Mm-hmm. So it's never something that it's a checkbox. Oh, okay. Well, I've done my proactive hunting for the day or the month. It's time to move on to the next thing. It's essentially an ongoing process that you really do need a dedicated team, and that's exactly what we have here, is a dedicated team of security experts that are doing this proactive hunting, as well as, of course, things like incident response, mm-hmm. And assessment, things like that.
Right. So we spoke about indicators of compromises and IOCs. I think we're going to talk more about IOCs. So can you briefly tell us, in your perspective, what is an indicator of compromise?
It could be a lot of things. I think potentially the most one that people are going to be familiar with is results from a vulnerability scan, or scans that are hitting your firewall. But I think that the better one to talk about in this case would be scans. When you do a vulnerability scan or an assessment, whether it's internal or external, it's going to give you a lot of results. Sometimes those results are false positives, whether it's because you're not setting credentials for your scans, they're not authenticated scans, or you're just kind of throwing the whole kitchen sink essentially at this server, this service, or the application, and you're going to get a lot back. And some of them are going to be of different severity levels, but really. Those are we call them indicators of compromise because they're indications. You still have to go about validating and actually mitigating and proving that indicator is an actual risk or threat to your company.
Okay. So today we are focusing to talk about proactive hunting, right? So I think, is there a thing called proactive hunting? If there is, then what's the difference between proactive hunting and reactive hunting?
Yeah. So mostly it's in the name, right? Proactive versus reactive, but some other terms that people might be familiar with, which you could kind of put over top of proactive and reactive, is proactive can also be thought of things like active defense or red teaming, mm-hmm. which is again just identifying risks or identifying indicators of compromise before they actually harm your business. And reactive can be thought of, well, we've seen something, and now we need to do incident response, or we need to do a post-mortem of this incident so that we actually know what happened, how it happened, and how we fix that. Proactive is essentially doing all of that before you actually have been hit with, whether it's ransomware or phishing, just really going about taking steps to mitigate this before it's actually happened.
Okay, great. So let's get to the next question. Why do we need hunting? I mean, since we already have forensic investigation tools, we have SIM, with dust correlation, we have SOC analysts. Is reactive good enough, or why do you think we need hunting?
Definitely reactive is the way that most people go, because it gives you a clear focus. It gives you an end goal to kind of reach when you're saying, well, we've got hit by this, here's how we fix it, now let's look at how we prevent that. Well, why we do this is because there's always new tools, there's always new techniques, malware, and exploits, vulnerabilities that are, whether even sometimes you have software that updates, new Java version, new Flash version. Okay, well, that's great that it's fixed these old vulnerabilities, but it most likely introduced new ones. And really, what you're going to want to do is that the main reason to do this is because, kind of stated this before in the difference is that you've now already been hit by it. If you can prevent the damage to your company before it actually happens, well, it's better. And quite honestly, in the space of security and IT, is if no one knows you're doing your job right, you're doing your job right.
Right. And also, since you mentioned in your previous answers about while you were talking about the indicators of compromises, you mentioned that not all of them actually gives you a clear indication that something has gone wrong. So,
yes.
And you said doing sort of a proactive or active monitoring using red teams type of approach might actually help to prevent those attacks in its tracks as opposed to recovery. Is that the right interpretation?
Yeah. Essentially, you'll be able to at least identify where your vulnerable processes are or your vulnerable software. I mean, half the battle is just knowing where your issues are. Even if you don't know how to fix them. Honestly, fixing them is the easy part.
Right.
Identifying them is the really difficult part.
Right.
Because again, once you have your focus, you know exactly what needs to be fixed. You can go and research, and they might call me or my other coworkers security experts, but I'm a Google expert. I know how to go and search and read about things and how to fix them, and a lot of time it's that something new comes out. Okay, well, this was announced today. I have no idea. This is just publicly announced today. I know nothing about it. I got to go research it, and really staying on top of the newest threats, the newest vulnerabilities, the newest exploits, and just everything out there is the hardest part of the battle.
Wow, that's a very good perspective to hear. Let's just take a question from audience which says, where does your threat intel come from? I think this came in when we were showing the sort of a SOC architecture, which we add threat intelligence into our correlation data. Do you think you can comment on what kind of typical threat intel?
Yeah. Our threat intel comes from the base would be all of the emerging threats and GPL. So that's where we start. So we use a lot of open source lists, but we also being trying to stay on top of everything. We also have we pay for enterprise threat lists. And then what we do is we take those, because a lot of companies are that's really where they stop. So what we've now done is taking either open source tools or tools that everybody's heard of. The first one that comes to mind is Whois, and taking that data and integrating Whois data into any threats that have to relate with DNS. We also, each security engineer has 2 hours a day of research built into their workflow. And what we'll do, and we'll actually go and modify, tune and maintain those lists. In any given day, we're tuning our threat intelligence by making rules more concise or more flexible, depending, and that's really the proprietary bit. If you're just running open source lists, and even some of the enterprise lists, I mean, we tweak all of our threat intelligence feeds, and then there's also, of course, we do things like URL categorization, reputation, IP risk and reputation, looking at things like a specific example from Whois is every domain that we see come across, we're going to go and reference the Whois database, see how long has that domain been around. Right. Is that domain younger than 7 days? Yeah. If so, it might be malicious. Right. It might not be. Okay. But you know, well, that's one example of how we're taking existing threat intelligence from the open source community or something like ThreatCrowd, and then importing that and writing custom rules into our rule set. Okay. So I'd say about 80% of what we use is totally custom to our own company, and probably about 20% is what you'd find out in the open source community and things like, you know, the emerging threats rule database.
Hope that answered the question. So can we get back to hunting again? And so let's talk about you know, when to hunt. I think you probably answered it in a way. My interpretation of what you answered is, you know, whenever you see any indicators of compromises, is that it, or?
Yeah, that's more like the second stage, because you have to have a process to identify them first.
Oh, okay.
So one example would be to integrate it into your either your business policies or your workflow that already exists. And an example of that would be, okay, well, we have our new web server, we're going to stand it up today. Well, okay, have you scanned that web server in either a test environment or internally to see if there are any inherent risks? There's a lot of web servers. I see daily people using defaults for things like Apache web servers or IIS web servers, and they're laden with vulnerabilities because they try to make them as flexible and open as possible and permissive as possible. Right. But that would be a really good example of when to do it. Of course, the real answer to that is at my previous company, there was always a team that was responsible for attempting to break into their own company at all times. There's a whole team of about 20 people that their main job was to try to essentially hack their own company, whether that was through social engineering, whether that was through phishing, or dropping flash drives in a parking lot with CNC malware on it, so you plug them in. So it's things like that, but I think a really good place to start, because not everybody can maintain a team of security professionals that are doing penetration tests on their network all day. A good place to start is to integrate it into your business practices. Right. When you turn up an application or a server, anything that's going to be exposed publicly, run a vulnerability scan on it. Just see, and that's going to tell you at least where to focus on or what to go research. And if nothing comes back, great. But now you know that there's at least no inherent risks with something that you're just trying out.
Okay, we'll buy. I don't want to be that weakest link in the company who would pick, sort of that flash drive, put it in, and then have. I imagine that all the security engineers would be wearing full black suit with black sunglasses, coming onto my desk and then saying, "Can we have a word?"
Maybe in some places.
Next question: how to hunt. So, I think what I really want to know from this question on how to hunt is, sort of take me through the process of what is your first line of thinking and subsequent line of thinking when it comes to the hunting process?
So the first thing, and like I said, the hardest thing, is staying informed. Knowing, you know your business. You either know your business, or if you're more in a space like us, you know your customer's business. Right. You know their technical needs. You know kind of their state of where they're at, and the only person who will be able to go and actually do that kind of research is you, because okay, I know that I have that I have these applications running, and I'm using this kind of hardware, and I know that this department uses Java, and that and all of our web servers run on Apache, and they have this is the version of PHP they're running for their containers and all that. So so that when you start there, knowing what you have, because if you're trying to do overall research, and I know this from just thinking back to my days before I really focused on security, was trying to learn it all, and you can't. It's too much. So if you kind of focus on what you know, as far as what's internal to your business, that will give you a good place to focus in doing research. And the other reason, and the other kind of how, is that if you find that either you have a vulnerable piece of software, or maybe you're a bit behind in your patching cycle, or you're using a great example would be something like Heartbleed or shell shock. Okay, that affected like millions. Millions and millions and millions. And I mean, still something like 30% of the internet is still vulnerable to something discovered in 2014, right? And that's one of the things that we're helping our customers with, is kind of getting ahead of the curve and things like that. But testing and things like scripts or commands or tools quickly become available to self-test. I think it took only 16 hours from the public disclosure of shell shock before there were hundreds of people writing their own scripts and uploading them to places like Threat Exchange or Stack Exchange, Server Fault, things like that, where they're just like, hey, download this script. It's a simple bash script. It's 3 or 4 lines. Run it on your web server locally, and it'll even say, they'll even have just little print statements in there that'll say you're vulnerable or you're not vulnerable. There's a lot of and then of course then you have the companies that do vulnerability scanning, or the developers of the vulnerability scans. You're going to notice it maybe takes about a month before they're integrating those newest threats into their vulnerability scans. So maybe you don't have time to go and research and download these scripts and run them, which of course would be the best way to do it, but it starts becoming more integrated with existing applications and security of programs. So the best thing to do is stay informed, and by staying informed, your business, you're going to know what you have. If you're reading an article on how to, what are the latest security threats for Java, and you don't have people using Java, you're wasting your time.
Right.
It might be a great story of interest. But yeah, you're going to know what you have, whether it's installed or the applications you're using. Again, the hardware, the software, your employees, and the applications and the services that you have. And if you can identify the issues that those have, then you'll know exactly. You'll have a focus. You'll be able to go and have an endpoint without having the endpoint being, well, now we've cleaned up this last incident that happened.
Right. Okay. That's a good segue into our next question, which is about tools. So what tools do you use? Or let me rephrase this question. Irrespective of what tools you use, what tools do you recommend people to use for proactive hunting purposes? Go ahead, please.
It's going to be the same. I would recommend because I use.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of these, I'm sure everyone's heard of Nmap, Nessus, and Metasploit, or at least 2 of those.
Right.
So you can use those to help validate. A lot of people, and even I, for the first couple of years using Nmap, did not realize that there's a whole host of integrated scripts called NSE scripts. So if you're not familiar with those, definitely go out and check those out. They're scripts that come preloaded with Nmap to, for example, if you want to know if you're vulnerable to all of these new SSL and TLS attacks, there is a NSE script called, I think it's called SSL, enum SSL ciphers.
Okay.
And that's going to, not only is it going to tell you, give you a rating A through F of all of your encryption schemes and ciphers and algorithms that you have running on your web server or your secured application.
Okay.
It's going to tell you, these are the CVEs that you're vulnerable to based on this. And then you can go and research that CVE ID to figure out, okay, what patches do I need to apply, or how do I go about mitigating this?
Okay.
You know, where are my weaknesses? So the first step is always identification.
Okay.
And then, as I mentioned earlier, because these are just indicators of compromise, you need to then validate. So validation can be done via logs, via tools, protocol analysis tools, like Wireshark or TCP dump. Wireshark's definitely going to give you a lot more options and exportability to go and research, or even correlation tools.
Okay.
There are some open source ones. One of the ones I've worked with is OSSIM, OSSIM. It's an open source product that is, you know, if you can't lay out the $500,000 capital to get something going, like any of the either managed or self-service kind of SIM appliances, then there are some open source correlation tools that eventually work as a SIM. Okay. And it's a good place to start. And then, you know, you can further tune them to have it be an ongoing thing. But like I said, red teaming, active defense is another technique. There's a lot of tools out there. It's a little bit older now, but things like tar pits that you run within your company. This is in relation to our poisoning. Okay. So if you're trying to man-in-the-middle attack somebody, first you have to poison their routes. You have to tell them, no, you're not going to the internet. I'm the internet now. Just tell me, give me everything, and I'll go ahead and forward that. So there are applications out there, and like I said, this is an older example, but it's kind of an easy to understand example, and it's been proven. Yeah. A lot of active defense out there is kind of it's a little bit shaky, but it's called the LeBray tar pit. So if you want to go just kind of take a quick read on that. But essentially what it is when somebody tries to go in and attack your network, it says, oh, hey, like this is exactly what I'm looking for. When somebody sends out a gratuitous ARP, there's systems and honeypots is essentially what we're talking about here as far as active defense goes. Okay. Where you're actually turning the tables on the attacker. There's also phishing tests, right? You can run phishing campaigns against your employees in the company. See who's vulnerable. See who actually goes and answers these. And then things, of course, like social engineering as well. These are social engineering is definitely one of the things you'd consider more ongoing. But there's a ton of tools, techniques, software out there, and a quick Google search will bring up hundreds of different tools. Right.
Yeah. I was looking at securitytools.org on the top list.
Yep.
I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, and nmap.org also has like the top 10 tools for each year.
That's actually a good segue into our next questions or sort of a topic on, these are some good number of tools, some and from different vendors. So automation, orchestration, how much, too much, silos, what's your perspective on it?
Well, automating security for sure is tough. There's definitely some area for the ability to do so, and we do it, right? We have machine learning, we have all of these processes for tuning our alerts. You can't just download a list of threat intel and have it scan your network, and you're going to get thousands of alerts, and 99% of them are going to be false positives,
right?
Because you're just downloading the generic rule sets where they need to be tuned for your organization. Okay, you need to know where your false positive is going to be. Who are the highest people that I need to watch, or the servers, or things like that. And you can automate things like the false positives. Like, one of the things that we do is automate out false positives by tuning each rule set for individual customers. We know this person has this application on their laptop. It's something I know that they need, and just because whether it was lazy programming from the vendor, believe it or not, it happens way more than I'd like to see it. And a simple example is they never bothered to create what's called a user agent. Okay. And every time you run that application or it makes a web request, every time you're going to get an alert. So loading a web page might throw 10 incidents at you.
Oh. Okay.
And if you don't go and tune that out and say and validate it, of course.
Right.
Say, I know this application. This application is what's causing this behavior, because they never bothered to create a proper username for this application. I'm getting generic or fake user agent alerts because it's unknown, right? They have even generic ones.
Okay.
Because a lot of times people are going to put in, like, a lot of malware might use something like Mozilla 4.0. It's not a real user agent.
Yeah.
But it might appear it's one if someone's looking at that and not really sure what they're looking for.
Right.
So there's things like that, but there does have to be a human at the top level, because you're going to get, and even a lot of our customers, they see the vulnerability scan that we provide to them. And they're like, oh my God, that's, this is like the worst, I'm vulnerable to all these things. And then I say, well, again, these are indicators of compromise. Let's go through and validate it. And I did this last week with somebody. They had 20 IOCs, and after about spending maybe 45 minutes going through and validating, there was only one of them that actually needed to be fixed. And it was because when it comes to automation, it's all best guess. They have a database of some past intelligence, and they're trying to make an extrapolation of that data from what they got back from you. They're trying to say, well, we didn't get a successful exploit, but we also didn't get an unsuccessful exploit. Okay. So take that how you will, right? You got to go and actually, because the vulnerability scanning is identification. You can't just identify something. You have to actually go and validate it to know that it's a real threat. So there does need to be a human at the top level, which would be something like an analyst or an engineer, who can interpret that data and say, I know how to test for this, or I know how to go and figure out how to test for this, so that I can for sure say, this is a false positive, and from now on, unless something else changes, every time I see that alert, I don't need to see it again, because I know it's false positive. Okay. And then that gives you time. It increases your efficiency. It gives you time to go and do the other things, whether that's your day-to-day or moving on to the next task.
So I think we've come to our final question for the day, right? So we just want to ask, what is not proactive hunting? What is not a proactive hunting?
Essentially, everything where, I guess, coming back to something I mentioned a lot, vulnerability scan. You run a vulnerability scan, it's not really hunting. It's identification, and like I said, there's a lot of work that goes into actually validating these. Hunting is not your IPS tools. It's not AV. It's not web filters. It's because all of these things are easily avoided. It catches 90% of things, but the really good threats are the ones that are not going to be caught by traditional IPS technologies or security devices.
Okay.
We see we would be out of business if that was the case. I mean, every day we see 20 to 30 threats, malware tools, CNC, even stupid things like spyware that walk right through the firewall, walk right through their web categorization, walk right through their AV. Why? Because all of that stuff is signature-based. It's static, unless you're changing it every day and modifying them, which we do. But you can't prevent what you don't know about. You can only detect it. And that's through anomalous use of DNS protocols or other protocols, or just things that if you know that you don't have that, like if you know I have no telnet services in my company, anytime you see port 23, that should be a red flag.
Right.
That is hunting. But reactive, doing things like postmortems and incident response, that's not hunting. Hunting is you're setting out. You start out with only knowing what are we using internally with my company. Hunting is going out, finding out, doing the research, getting informed, then going and actually looking for those threats. And that could even be something as simple as trying to get somebody, if you work in an office where you have key card access, asking somebody else to let you in without proving your identity.
Yeah.
If they're gonna do that, then it's not a technical control.
Right.
It's something very simple. And at my last company, you would actually be docked. Larry and Sergey would go around and ask you to let them in the door, right? I mean, you know them. It's that you know them, and they're, I'm not going to say no to the CEO, right? Or the VP or the president, but when you actually asked to see their badge, they actually gave you a $20 bill.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because so it's things like that, or even turning up to registering a domain. Get a $10 domain, call it whatever you want, and send emails to your internal employees, just asking them simple information. You can start with something like as simple as, I need you to validate this for me. Can you open this Excel document and attach an executable? It's as simple as that. And when you see there's some things, and of course it goes all the way from technical, like how do I validate all of my ciphers and my encryption algorithms on my web server, to asking somebody to hold the door open for you, or looking at things like I think yesterday talking to one of the other guys, and he was telling how when they went on site to visit with a customer, without providing any ID or proof of who they were or what they were going to do, they just let them into the data center, left them alone in the data center for about 15, 20 minutes.
It's not good at all.
I mean, yeah. So just there's a ton of different ways to do it, but yeah, it's all about being proactive versus reactive. Absolutely.
Wow, that's a cool story. Wow, those are some really cool stories. Hey Ross, thanks a lot again for your time talking about all of those questions in detail. We just have about a minute left, and I just want to make sure that we are Arctic Wolf Networks. We're a cybersecurity company. We have hundreds of customers, experience and expertise of analyzing over 1 trillion events. We roughly do about 5 billion events a day. We have a 24/7 cloud-based SOC based on Elastic Stack. We provide vulnerability scan, proactive hunting, machine learning, proprietary SIEM, everything combined as a service. And our key metrics is, we call ourselves a managed detection and response company, and we provide SOC as a service, all at a fraction of a cost of what we pay, say, Ross Phillips, one security engineer. So hit us if you have any questions at ask@arcticwolf.com. And again, feel free to share this presentation or webcast with your colleagues and network. Give us your feedback if you really like this, and we'll be happy to know how you felt about this webinar, and then if you want to have some similar topics. Again, Ross, thank you so much for your time today.
Absolutely.
It was a pleasure talking to you.